Privacy rights as they relate to genetic screening. More and more screening is available that can pick up certain carriers for genetic diseases. There are actually, talk about Yiddish before, and Yiddish-speaking doctors, there are many Yiddish curses. And the Yiddish curses are smart, they're intelligent. You know, curses in English is a four-letter word. Yiddish curses have substance to them. There's a famous Yiddish curse that says they should name a disease after you. I mean, it's got a little oomph, it's got a little something to it. We're living in a world, single-payer healthcare systems, right? Pre-existing conditions. Someone wants to have genetic screening. They're a carrier for a genetic disease. There are many Jewish genetic disease, whatever race, whatever denomination, it doesn't matter. Can an insurance company come along and say, we paid for your genetic screening. We see that you're a carrier for a particular medical condition, that if you take these steps to prophylactically solve this problem before it becomes a problem, think of Angelina Jolie, you'll be fine. If you choose not to, we don't want to cover you when you get sick later. Is that within the purview of an insurance company to even know that type of information? Should genetic screening be private? Francine?
So I think that raises the question of, do genetic tests deliver uncertain probabilities or clear-cut predictions of disease? And there really isn't a clear answer as to what the results of genetic testing show. So for an insurance company to mandate for a woman who tests positive for the BRCA gene, for example, to have a mastectomy, but there's no clear-cut evidence that she might actually someday develop breast cancer. So I think it becomes a very, very slippery slope if we were to allow insurance companies to mandate these types of procedures. How far are we going to go?
Information?
Well, I think the problem, if they have access, so if they have access to the information, they're not, by federal law, they're not allowed to use that information to determine eligibility for individuals' health insurance or the premiums that they might pay. So I'm not sure what they would do with access to the information.
I'm sure Dr. Kaplan has an opinion.
Looks like he does.
Well, they'll exclude you, and they certainly will try very hard, not just health insurance, but disability insurance, life insurance, or different types of insurance. Even in the employment area, while we've tried to litigate it away, it still goes on. But I want to tell you a story since I knew I was coming to the Jewish Law Symposium. I got a call from a friend a couple of years ago who said at Johns Hopkins, they're doing a study of genetic factors that seem to be a risk factor for depression. And they're only doing it in synagogues in Baltimore. Maybe you should find out why that is. And I said, I don't know, Woody Allen? I mean, I don't know, what's the something? So I called up the investigator and I said, so why are you collecting data just in synagogues? Which, by the way, is a different type of genetic privacy risk because now it's about groups. And the researcher said, yes, I am doing that. It's because they're very reliable and they come in for their appointments. So it had nothing to do with, a predisposition of anything. It was just, this was an easy population that seemed to like doctors for some reason. Maybe not this audience, but generally. And so, you can get group bias. You can have entire zip codes start to get zoned out. It doesn't have to be the individual. I remember in the AIDS epidemic, there were plenty of people who wouldn't write insurance at all in certain zip codes because of risk factors. So there are penalties that can accrue.
Should insurance companies be able to consider genetics a pre-existing condition?
They do. It's done, over, settled. Even if they're risk factors, they still do. And at least with respect to healthcare, we still haven't declared it a right. So for private entities, for various reasons, they don't have to insure you. For life insurance, disability insurance, absolutely, they can do what they want. There's no right to any of those things. So we've had people that we've said, if you're going to get a genetic test for something, pay cash.
Interesting.
And I think something to think about as well is the more the public realizes that insurance companies may be using results of genetic testing in these fashions, then we may be hesitant to undergo genetic testing, thereby hurting our own long-term health and not having knowledge that we might otherwise have to make our own healthcare decisions, which in the long run could cost the insurance companies more as well.
And sorry to babble in here, but one other angle of genetic testing that's coming fast. So many of you are familiar with genetic testing for Down syndrome, where you might use something called amniocentesis, a big needle that gets fluid out from where the fetus is inside the womb. But what's coming very fast is free cell DNA testing, where you can get the fetus's DNA out of the mom from her blood. There's no big procedure. You can probably start doing it at 8 weeks. That means pre-existing conditions are identified or risk factors in fetuses, leading to some interesting questions both about what would lead somebody to terminate that pregnancy or insurability of the newborn baby.
Rabbi, genetic testing, genetic screening, and the obligation maybe from a moral angle to take preventative measures to avoid getting certain illnesses and diseases.
I think the Jewish tradition looks here as follows. Where we are now is just at the beginning of a long journey. And right now, this is full of moral difficulties and ambiguities. Over time, though, genetic testing holds out the possibility of providing enormous palliative insight. And it's hard to draw important ethical lines 10% away along on the journey. The truth is that right now, there are all sorts of serious problems. But we all recognize that in the long term, genetic testing is in the best interest of society as a whole. It pushes the forefront of medicine, allows cures to be developed that we heretofore would never be aware of. That doesn't mean that the problems raised here aren't serious and important to us in front of us, but you also have to recognize that sometimes you have to live with a certain amount of pain in the short term to produce long-term medical gain. We have to protect people in the here and now from the problems of insurance abuse. We have to prevent them from being stigmatized from undergoing genetic testing. But to institute wholesale blockage against long-term medical progress is not what the Jewish tradition wants. There's a duty and an obligation, a deep religious obligation to push the forefront of medicine and to cure people of illnesses in the long term over an extended period of time. To become a Luddite because of the problems associated with treatment here and now in front of us sounds like it's not a long-term best interest of society. That doesn't mean the issues that we're highlighting here aren't important and shouldn't be addressed in a palliative way. But people's natural desire to say, let's not go there because the short-term consequences of going there will be very great, misses the enormous long-term gains that will be provided by genetic testing, which in the long term produces cures to important illnesses. Genetic engineering holds out the possibility of significant medical advances curing of illnesses that we fundamentally imagine now as being uncurable. We shouldn't prevent this exploration, this opportunity to boldly go where those before us have not gone before.
So I was going to add, I don't think there's a grave risk of slowing down genetics in medicine. There is some risk in agriculture, in food. We all know about GMO, Ludditism, which I oppose. I think that holds the key to solving some of our climate, environmental pollution problems. However, if, to get back to the rabbi's charge about community versus individual, the genetics issue basically says all of us have risk factors. Some of us get identified now, some of us will be identified later, but guess what? Genetic tests, nobody passes because everybody's mortal.
It's like law school.
Yeah. So you're going to die of something. We just may get to your BRCA1 genes before we get to your risk factor for stomach cancer or whatever it is. You have to start to risk rate insurance as a community. You can't do it as individuals. It's fundamentally unfair. It's fundamentally wrong. You have to pool together, stand together as a community. That's what's missing in our healthcare debate. We keep trying to risk rate out the at-risk people because that's what the commercial entities want to do. We have to take a stand, as Blue Cross did many years ago, and say we're going to community rate because we're all in this together, and that's certainly true of our genes.
And that actually brings us full circle because the topic for this evening was law, medicine, and the pursuit of justice. I thank Mr. Fishman for pointing out that there was a typo on the inside of the invitation that had last year's topic of the right to decide. But I thank you because I didn't know what I would atone for on Yom Kippur this weekend, but now I have something to put on my list. But it brings us full circle because our lives really are about the pursuit of justice. And as Mr. Fishman mentioned in the final Avinu Malkeinu prayer that we say, Asei Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed, we ask God to do with us justice and mercy. So I'm going to ask the panel as the final wrap-up segment, give us something from your experience, something from your professional background and your professional careers that relate to the pursuit of justice, a message that you want to share with the audience before they hit the doors running.
No, I get to go first. All right. I think from the point of view of healthcare and medicine, when it comes to justice, we basically have gotten too far down the road of a for-profit driver behind our system. We mentioned before that sometimes the cost of things come down. You know, the cost of insulin, to give an example of a drug, has gone up 300% in the past 5 years, and there is no new insulin. Saline solution, which is salt water, has gone up in this country 80% price increase.
EpiPens, right?
EpiPens are off the charts. We all get mad at Martin Shkreli, who's a fringe character of no interest. If you look day to day, the justice problem that we face is we keep saying we can't insure everybody, but it's because we can't pay the prices. We're not paying the prices that anybody else pays in this world. We're being silly about it. The number one goal for justice in healthcare is to get a handle on cost. If we don't do that, we won't find justice.
Francine, pursuit of justice.
So it's an interesting way to end this evening for me. When I graduated law school, my great aunt, right before she passed away, bought me a print, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, Justice, Justice, Shout, Thou, Pursue. And it has hung in my office for 20 plus years. And I look at it a lot and think about, you know, how does that guide us? So one issue that I would raise, kind of piggybacking off of Arthur, is what the for-profit world is doing to healthcare. I'm working in pharma now and recently became aware of an orphan drug that recently received FDA approval. It's not a drug that will cure a neurological disease. It's a drug that merely prolongs life of these patients. And these patients typically die within 3 to 5 years of diagnosis. This drug buys 1 to 3 years of life. Not a great quality of life. These people are still going to die very horrible, expensive deaths. And the insurance companies are balking. They don't want to pay for this drug for a lot of the patients because it's merely going to prolong their costs of caring for these patients. So where's the justice in that? 1 to 3 years might mean a lot to somebody. They might get to see their child get married. They might get to graduate college. They may get to get married. And so we struggle in this country with the need for profit and the need to pursue justice.
Rabbi, last word.
We get together in prayer as a community because all of us are wounded in many different ways, each of us in our own individual way. And we recognize that the God who judges us and the community that we live in provides us each with an opportunity to grow stronger by linking hands with others around us. The pursuit of justice doesn't mean I do justice all the time in every way I possibly can. That would be nice. But a more realistic model is that we as a community seek to do justice consistently integrated over a whole. This is a model not just for society, but for healthcare as well. There is no solution to the healthcare crisis unless we get together as a society and, as you expressed it very well, we pool risk. There's no solution other than through risk pooling, which recognizes that I can't be looked at too closely. This is the message of the Day of Atonement. I seek to worship in a community precisely because I hope that God overlooks my flaws because of the virtues of the people around me. Healthcare is like the Day of Atonement. It's the community that counts.
I want to thank our panel very, very much. Give them a round of applause. I want to thank Paul Fishman for your wonderful words. I want to thank all of you for joining us here tonight. There's a lot more to be discussed, and this symposium is really meant to just stimulate some ideas and thoughts and get us to think on the broader scale about life and about justice and about meaning to our lives. A couple of quick announcements. There are challahs for you to take on your way out tonight. There are multiple exits to the facility. You don't all need to go out the front. If you go around the building, there are 2 other exits to the facility. Please leave your name badges at the front door. If you didn't sign in for your credits, you don't need to sign out. Credits are going to be emailed to you, but make sure that you sign in. I want to wish you all a happy and healthy, sweet new year. There will be a minyan for Myriv outside in the lobby, and I thank you all for joining us. Thank you very much.